Sammy, let me know when you're ready.
I'm just getting the live feed going and recording started, so probably about 1 minute.
Okay.
Showtime.
All right. Let's get on with this show. I'm going to call the meeting of the mayor of the Coburg Budget Committee to order on May 24th at 6:03 p.m. A couple of notes. I want to remind everybody to please speak into a speaker. And through some glitches and field trials, we've learned one thing, that those of us on Zoom may have problems hearing the people in the studio. So one of the first things that I'd like you to look for, if you can, is if I'm touching my ears, that means I can't hear you and something's gone awry. Just touch your ears, you too, Todd, if you're not hearing something, and hopefully somebody will see that and we can rectify the situation. Make sure you speak into your microphones, and also make sure the little green light is on when you're speaking into the microphone. That would be very helpful. Roll call, Sammy.
Thank you. Marcus Alexander is absent. Patricia McConnell is absent. John Lehman. Nancy Bell is absent. Kyle Blaine is absent. John Fox.
Present.
Linda Krager. Here. Elise Landry. Here. Paul Thompson is absent. Todd Waters.
Here.
Terry Dawson.
Here.
And Jeff Milan.
I'm here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Sammy. All right. We have a pretty solid core of people here who have been through this process quite a few times, but I want to introduce a new budget committee member, and that's Elise Landry. Welcome, Elise, and looking forward to working with you. I think you'll find this group very interesting and knowledgeable, and we have a good process, and it works well because of the people. So we'll have an interesting discussion, and every year is always a little different, but the process is essentially the same. It's taken us several years to get a process where the council sets goals, which is what we're supposed to use as a budget committee to prioritize how our budget is spent. With some great intimidation from most staff members because they didn't want to speak in front of people. We've been able to get a production going where we have presentations from each of the department heads that come to the council first so that we can do the goal setting. And then they refine that to bring the budget message to the entire budget committee. And I think the process has been working really well. And like I said, we refine it a little bit each year, but it's a good process, and I really believe in the way it's working and doing well. If you're wondering why I'm so flush, my office is upstairs, and I haven't been upstairs for a week, and it was 95 degrees up here half hour ago when I came in, so the air conditioning is going to take a bit. The first thing on the agenda is to elect a chair and a vice chair. And then once those are filled, they will take over the meeting. For those of you that may not know, I'm not actually a member of the budget committee. I do attend the budget committee and want to be a part of it. But the governing board and then the 6 appointed citizens are the actual budget committee. If there is a tie, I would vote to break that. But technically, I am not a budget committee member. Every year, the first meeting of our budget committee is to elect the chair and the vice chair. And again, like I said, once those are elected, then I will turn that over to them and they'll run the rest of the budget meetings. So at this point, I would entertain motions for chair. Councillor Lehman,
I'd like to nominate John Fox.
John Fox for chair. Is there a second for John Fox as chair?
I'll second. Todd Waters seconds.
Thank you. Do we have any other nominations for chair? Last call for any nominations for chair of the budget committee. Hearing none, I have a motion by Councillor Lehman and a second by committee member Todd Waters to elect John Fox as the chair of the budget committee for 2022-23. All those in favor, please raise your hands.
Thank you.
Looks like it was unanimous. Congratulations, Chair Fox. Would you like me to run the vice chair election or would you like to get some practice? He's speechless.
Go ahead and seek nominations for the vice chair. Nominations? Am I allowed? I will nominate Linda Kroger. Second.
Who was the second?
By John Fox and a second by Terry Dawson. Favor? Say aye, raise your hand and raise.
To do our hand for Ray. Todd.
Thank you.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? None. Okay, we have chair and a vice chair. I'm Fox and Linda Kroger.
You want the fancy seat?
No, good.
Okay.
It can be interesting from here.
Oh, here, I'm gonna give you this.
Okay. We need a roll call. We did that. Election chair. Meeting adjourned.
Agenda item number 5.
We have the budget meeting minutes from last year, budget year 2021, 22, where we met on the 18th and the 25th, and seeking these to be approved for filing. Are there any comments on the agenda of the minutes from last year?
I have one
Corrections?
correction. I have a correction to the draft minutes on page 3. The fifth paragraph down says pooled, and I think it should be pulled. And I have already forwarded that information to the city folks, and I believe it will be changed in the signed copy. But I do want to. Page 3 of the draft minutes. I don't think you're on the draft.
Oh. Other corrections to be suggested? Fifth paragraph?
Oops, I just closed my page.
I count the 6th paragraph.
Okay,
Where is this?
okay.
Did everybody find that?
Suggestions for corrections and that you submitted them already. We will correct the who pulled. No. I'm seeking a motion to, now that we have the amendments, to approve the minutes as amended. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Minutes are approved for filing. Okay, Tim Gaines, for the budget binder material review.
Good evening, welcome. Before I go over the binder, I'm just gonna talk about the document I handed out to you guys real quick like. That is a correction of what's in the binder. What we found today is that somehow when we printed it, there were some lines that got scrunched and hidden that we didn't see. They were calculated in the totals and sums, so all of our balances are correct. We checked that and made sure that was the case. But we reprinted them. I highlighted the description and the number in kind of a reddish pink color. So you can see it. We're not trying to hide anything from you. I just somehow we had a printing error. And I'm trying to find out how that happens so it doesn't happen going forward. But I wanted to point that out and also provide you with what the details that we can look at if you like to.
Todd, I had just emailed that to you. It came in right before the meeting started, and then Mayor, we delivered a copy of that to you as well.
Yeah, I have it up on my laptop. Thank you.
Anyway, is there any questions about that? Sorry about that. Trying to make sure that doesn't happen again. Try to learn from it when I find out what happened. Okay, if there's no questions, I'm going to move on to the budget book. Does anybody have any questions on the budget book at all? Itself, the physical copy?
Well put together.
Yes, everybody worked hard on that, so. Every department. We're not doing I'm confused.
We're just talking about the budget book at this time and any changes in it or pointing.
Oh,
out.
okay, gotcha.
Sorry.
Okay, the only change I have is what I shared with you already. Sorry. I was thinking we were doing a PowerPoint presentation. I'm a little confused. My fault. Is there any questions or anything you guys see that causes you concern?
We can, basically, the book as it is designed, the design was taken from another city who won the budget award. So about 5 years ago, we kind of looked at several cities and how they were doing it and kind of copy them without going out. Decided we wanted to present award-winning book. And so that's what we did. So basically, in each department, there is a written message from your department heads, and I'm sure you saw those. They won't be getting up and talking to you tonight. They will be here to answer your questions. So those messages are in the front of each department. And so that's pretty much the same as we've always done. And then there are some extra supporting documents in the back. Those have to do with debt and the pay scale for staff and allocation payments that the other departments make to the general fund because they have to pay their share of administration. And so those are the kind of things that are in the supporting documents. And then the URA budget is not in here. You will receive that tonight so that you have it in advance to review for the URA budget meeting, which it's a very, very small document. It's tiny, so you'll have plenty of time to review that. So that's what you should see in there. Different from last year is this the information about the budget committee and the calendar is on the back of the binder. So if you didn't see that, we tried to make it a little bit more convenient for it. So one of the things we always do this time is have you look at your name on that list and make sure your information is correct on the back of the binder. So if we need to fix that, we can do that and get it sent back out to you.
Please recognize Elise for a question.
And I just wanted to note that I'm not seeing my name on the back of the binder, and so there's a new one. One was handed out.
Oh, yeah.
A new one was handed out.
It's right over there. Mandy, would you mind grabbing?
They all have it.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Also, what was handed out tonight with the packets was a copy of tonight's slideshow. So you have a printed PowerPoint for reference. Then we had the updated card that's on heavy woods or heavy cardstock, so you can slip it into the back. What was the third thing? What was the third thing?
That's good.
Okay.
Okay, with our updated calendar and including Elise, we can move on to the budget message. Man.
Ray, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can.
So, good evening. This is kind of our first budget meeting in our new suite where we will from now on offer all public meetings as in person or Zoom. And so a lot of work went into this suite. So I'm really happy that we're able to use it. Sammy really headed that work up. It was a lot of hard work and a lot of decisions to be made. So, but one thing that we have learned is that you really must lean forward and speak into your mic. You can't sit back in your chair and make sure your light is on. Because I know from Planning Commission the other night, we really realized that people that are sitting back in their chair, the people on Zoom cannot hear. And so just try to lean in. So tonight, it's a little bit of a transition. I've always been the person that presented the budget and gave the budget message as finance director. Tim is new to the finance director. And so it's a bit of a transition year. I'm going to lead off and we will tag team it. Because he's really, last year he was just kind of watching, he was new, and this year is his first year as the budget officer. So be patient as we tag team this, and there's very good information for you. So to start off, I wanted to talk about if we go to the council goals. So annually, the council set their goals, and in a goal setting session, and for the last 2 years, they've had these same goals. They didn't see the need to change them. It's overall goals. And what changes is the staff work plan. And that's based upon the work that the staff does to prepare for the council for their retreat. And then suggestions of what should be on the work plan. And then the council has the final say and they adopt a work plan. And then we go into the goal setting or the budget setting. So if we go to the next slide, I just want to remind you that we work under priority-based budgeting. And that means that the council sets the priorities for the work plan. Underneath their goals and so staff present to the council discuss, the department budgets are based upon what is the approved work plan, and then it comes to the budget committee for review and recommendation for adoption. So if something's not on the work plan, it doesn't mean it can't be in the budget, but if push came to shove and we have to remove something from the budget, the general rule is we're going to go to that work plan because those were the priorities that were adopted by the council. So if we have to choose between A and B, then whatever's on the work plan is going to get funded possibly. And so there'll be choices to made. I hope we don't have to do that, but it helps to prioritize what is the most important work of the city. And so that we make sure our funding is following that. So just a reminder of what the budget committee does. So the budget committee, you are here to represent the citizens of the community. You're here to hear the budget message and review the budget, the proposed budget. You can ask questions, discuss amongst yourself, definitely ask questions of the staff, and then make a recommendation in the end to the council to adopt the budget as approved. And so what the budget committee doesn't do is set policy. So you don't set employment policies. You probably don't set the salary scale. You don't decide whether a service will be replaced or changed. A lot of times services of the city are set by ordinance. So our water utility policies are set by ordinance. So the budget committee wouldn't change those. And you do not have the final vote of the budget. So the budget is voted on by the council, and that will be at their June meeting. So just to remind you of a different process that you might have experienced in the past is because we're in Zoom and in person, it becomes very difficult to hear staff presentation after staff presentation, just because we find it's a little bit more complicated. So staff will not be giving presentations on their departments. We will step through each department, the slides, and you're encouraged to ask questions of the department heads. Any questions that are asked that are unrelated to the department that we are discussing at that time will be recorded, and then we'll address those questions at the end. If you are attending remotely, please raise your hand, wave your hand, do everything you can. If you have a question and we're not recognizing you, then please, use your hands. We don't want to skip you. If you are attending in person, reminder, keep your microphones on. So that's kind of the housekeeping pieces. So I'm going to start out with some achievements that the city realized this year based on last year's work plan that was adopted. So we did complete a salary analysis and adjustments to the salary scale. That was mid-year. We completed the salary analysis and found that there were many positions in the city that were very low and not comparative to the region. Primarily in the police and the public works departments. Why it becomes important is because when we're looking at a comparison to who do we lose our staff to? That's an important question to ask. And are we competitive in our salaries with those agencies? Sometimes we can't be. That's our reality as a small city. So, but we did do a salary analysis. We did see that there was some comparative issues. And so the council did vote to make some changes to the salary scale mid-year. And there were some adjustments to salaries. We did do some great upgrades to City Hall. I hope you guys like the new look. We definitely, we have new windows, new siding and paint, and security enhancements. The studio here was a pretty large job. We passed the transportation utility fee. That was a monumental piece of work that took 2 years to complete. And we continue to address transportation issues that we have in Coburg with our regional partners. We're continuing to implement the water master plan and our transportation improvement plan. We implemented Main Streets. We've been talking Main Streets for several years, but this year it was implemented into an actual board being formed. There's a chair and 501c3 documents are being filed. So Main Streets is quickly moving to become its own entity. The city is funding a part-time employee to serve that entity until it can get on its feet. We did implement a franchise with Douglas Fastnet, DFN, which is a high-speed internet company who will be hitting Coburg in July. So they will be locating their control box on city property over by Sarah Lane. So their intention is to serve our downtown and our local residents. The neighborhoods that have overhead lines are going to be the first to get internet. Those that are underground line, the need for underground, that's going to take a little bit longer. But we're very excited to welcome them to Coburg, and they're excited to be here. A little bit more about that is they specifically chose Coburg as a pilot program. So they are actually mapping our internet in Coburg for us at no charge. So other cities are paying for this, but they decided to use us as a pilot. So it's a great opportunity for us to understand where are we lacking in Coburg in order to provide high-speed internet. The annexation of 107 acres of a light industrial zone was passed, and we have passed the appeal period, so it is a go. We approved a 26-home residential subdivision. Completion of the bike kiosk in Pavilion Park. If you haven't seen it, you should take a look. It's going to be dedicated on Thursday, and so that will be exciting. We'll be inviting the region out to join us. We're in the middle of the Public Works shop design, and that process is moving forward. We continued emergency response training and drills. Recently, the staff took a day to drill on what happens if we don't have City Hall to work in. What if our operations center is a tent in the field, or we have to move it to the elementary school gym? And how would police, public works, and administration all figure how would we work? And so it was a really great exercise, and we continue to have those exercises so we can best serve our customers in an emergency. We just completed a land swap with Shepherd Investments or Shepherd family for the land adjacent to Pavilion Park. So that has always been kind of used for parkland, but it never was parkland. It didn't belong to the city, and it could have been sold at any time, which have reduced the amount of area we had there. So that is not recorded at the county yet. We haven't, it's going through escrow, but the agreement is signed. And so that's a really great ability to expand that park. And so to back that up, we've applied for a $450,000 grant to enhance a public plaza in that park. So we today received an invite to schedule a presentation on our grant. So that's good. We're being invited to present our project. The ad hoc committee has completed their work on the development code for the Central Business District and are making recommendations for changes to our development code. And that will be coming to Planning Commission at their next meeting. And we've had park updates, park work parties, and lots of future planning for parks and transportation and things like that in the city. And I guess the biggest thing is the continued operations through COVID-19 pandemic with ever-changing guidelines and requirements. I would have to say that I think we might be the only agency that has not sent staff home, that we retained our staff. We have offices that allow us to do that. They all have doors on them. We have put in protocols for distancing staff, and I'm not going to say it was perfect and no one got sick, but I would say that we did a pretty good job. And the staff have maintained an amazing attitude about this. And so I think it's a testimony to how dedicated and committed they are. So those are the positives, the achievements of the city this year. I think we've had a great year in spite of some challenges of just working with agencies where nothing is normal. And that you're constantly, people are shifting. There's a great shift of employment right now. So those people that we're used to working with may not be there anymore. So, but we are working and we're making it work. And so that's positive. We do have some challenges that I want to make you aware of. We don't know the full impacts of COVID-19 at this time still. We are starting to see that state shared revenue, it could hamper state shared revenues. We are seeing some effects on our franchise fees. We don't know exactly what that is, but we do know that there were shutdowns in our industrial zone where they shut down whole shifts. So they were not running their machinery for whole shifts. Transportation revenues, we're just watching these things and we're watching them very closely. The ARPA funds allow us to replace our revenue, but we have to have proof that we actually lost revenue. So the economy, cost of goods sold have went up anywhere from 7 to 22%. It depends on what you want to buy. Cost of construction is up, and personal services, health insurance, things like that are up. In transportation, we have real challenges in Coburg with our freight and commuter traffic. Our main roads are owned by other agencies. And so there's a challenge of how do we manage our main streets and create a safe environment for our pedestrians when we don't own the road. And so that's been a really good opportunity for us to build some strong relationships with Lane County and have this continuous conversation that is happening. The cost of repairing the roads in the current market is really an unknown. So we went out for probably our largest street project that we will do of all the projects that are set today. So we'll see where it comes in, but it's a little shaky because of the cost. And so we also have residential lands within the UGB that are challenged for transportation. So, so we're working on that. In our utilities, it's the same. It's cost of goods, personal services, increase in cost of capital projects, and the projected users for the utility system right now are a little, we don't know. So we brought in 107 acres of light industrial. We plan on it being developed, but with the economy the way it is, it could be delayed. People might not choose to develop right now. So that is always out there. Do I have any questions about any of those things? Yes, sir.
For the cost of repairing the road.
We could get anywhere from, usually we'll get at least 3, and sometimes we'll get up to 7, but it just depends on how busy people are. And sometimes it's a really busy environment, and a lot of times the bids we see are local. So in the Eugene Springfield area. So at this point, we don't know. Else? So I did want to bring one thing to your attention because it is something that is, if you saw Facebook today, you would have seen a letter to the residents about the water project. And that will go out in utility billings as well and in the newsletter. So the water project has been going pretty smoothly up until now. Construction costs have risen at 6 to 28%. We have a challenge with our reservoir project. So the reservoir is part of the water master plan. It was planned to go up on the hill on the east side. And as we started the engineering for that site, we found that it is just not appropriate site. It is very challenged with soils, with large boulders, with creek crossings. And the site that was chosen in 2007 would create a pressure on our system that would require us to put new equipment on every service in town, which would be very expensive. There will be an increase in the cost of the reservoir, obviously, because of the economic times. And what we need, what we will have to consider is an elevated storage that you might see in other small towns across America. And that is a water tower sticking up. Now we have the council's approved a feasibility study for the water project to look at an alternative site, to do an analysis on our current reservoirs. What are the health of those reservoirs? And the updated analysis will also relook at growth projections and required water for the community. We may need, probably will need additional funding to complete this project. And that could force a raise in utility fees and water fees. So this is something that we're looking very closely at. In their May meeting, the council approved a work plan for moving through this process. And the feasibility study has already started. Staff will be looking at fee scenarios and how they'll impact the budget. In June and July, we'll be presenting that to the council, June or July. We're going to continue a public education about the water system and about the project. And results of feasibility study will be available in September. Then the council will have what they need to really start the discussion of whether or not we need to raise utility fees. With the cost of operations and personnel right now, I can't imagine that we don't have to raise fees. It's substantial. It's not something you can just ignore. But they're going to take their time and they want to bring the community along with them. So that will all happen in the fall at this time. So with that, I just wanted to bring that up because it's a pretty substantial piece. The other piece I wanted to mention that I didn't add in here is that the street fund, we have in the budget to borrow funds and to complete some street fund projects this year. I was just in a meeting today. That was the first date I could actually get the meeting with the ODOT Bank to borrow funds to complete our street projects that we need to do this summer. And in that meeting, really great information came out, but basically is the city's going to borrow less money than we anticipated and get this summer done. And let's wait and see the transportation bill package. When that's being opened slowly, there may be grant funds available to us that we will find out about. The other piece is the interest rate is 3% today. That could go up. And we don't want to borrow $2.5 million on a 3% interest rate when it might go back down to a 1.5 next year. So I just want to tell you that because we will bring a different street budget to you next week because we're going to rework it. And so I want you to be aware of that. It was too late for us today by the time I was able to sit in this meeting. So we will be doing that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim, who is going to cover some financial information, and then we're going to get into the department information.
Hello again. So the slide we have in front of us is a comparison from 2020 to 2021, our last two audits. I'm just going to go over a couple things on that. The net position of the city is up by about $733,000. Our general fund balance is down a little bit by about $113,000. Our cash investments are up by $136,000. Our total assets are down. That's due to mainly depreciation between the 2 years. Our capital debts, as we've talked about in the past year, are down about $308,000. And our county taxes are up by about $50,000. Franchise fees, like Ann said, we're trying to find out what's happening with them. They have went down this year and last year, so we're concerned about that. We're doing an investigation on it. From 20 to 21, they were down about $23,000. And our utility fees are higher. So most of the stuff, utility fees are higher by 115,000, sorry. So we're going in the right direction in most areas. I would entertain any questions about any of that.
Question.
Sure.
You say the franchise fees went down both years. Was it consistent with the year before or the year before it was more?
2021 is when we started seeing it. It's continued into 2022. So
Before they were growing.
yes, they were, every year they would grow a little bit. We have been in touch with some of the utility companies, and like I said, we're trying to investigate and find out what's happening.
My question was, is the deficit growing each year or is it flatline the same amount?
We just haven't finished 22 yet, so I can't say for sure at this point, but after the year's over, I could definitely report that to you and will. Other questions?
The capital assets going from 28 million to 19 million. Is quite a drop. A little more discussion on that explanation.
I don't have the detail on that, but I'd be happy to email it to you or get it to you in some other form tomorrow or sometime this week.
Can you at least kind of describe what is involved, why it would drop so much?
I believe it has to do with the depreciation. So if you remember right, we put a $28 million project on the books all at one time. When the sewer was added to the books, it all went on at the same time. So there is a large depreciation that happens all at the same time as well. And that in the notes of the financial statements for both these years, and we're happy to send them out to you, you can see the actual differences line by line.
So it's a depreciation scheme or formula
Right.
as opposed to any real loss of income or loss of property.
Right.
Correct.
We retire property, like we could get rid of a pickup or something like that, but that's not gonna have a huge effect, obviously.
They're pretty expensive. things.
Yeah, right. Any other questions? Slide is a comparison of the budget we're currently in and the budget we're talking about tonight. In most cases, things are good, and beginning fund balance is up about $200,000. Our revenues are up about 1.57 million. Expenses are up 1.66 million. And personnel is up $304,000. Contingency is down 300,000, but ending fund balance is up 360,000 across all funds. Questions on any of
There's a
that?
reduction in the contingency due to the COVID and unexpected expenses.
Yeah, it's been a rough year with some of the, like the franchise fees and other things that aren't coming in like we expect them to.
The other part of that is that we are in capital project years in two funds. And so generally, our ending fund balances are going to go down. So contingencies are there so that if we need to, we can change the budget. But in any given year, we need to limit how much we can do that in order to make sure that we end up with a healthy ending fund balance. So there are some years when it is on capital project years, you're going to drain that fund down. And then when your capital project's over, it'll start building back up again. But you don't want to allow for so much budget change that you're putting your ending fund balance at risk. I hope that makes sense.
Questions? Next slide is our budget summary for the budget we're proposing of 2023. This year we'll be budgeting $17,103,837 in appropriations. And that compares last year to $15,223,510 in appropriations. Any questions on this page? If not, I'll move on. What we have here is the largest increases in our budget. What I did was grab at least the top 10. I think I put a little more than that on there. And then the bottom of this is it's new items that we didn't have on the budget last year because it doesn't really register a percentage increase. So I thought I'd put those on there. They're the largest, and we wanted to share that with you guys. It's been something of interest in the past. So any questions on that slide? Oh,
The
sorry.
Roberts Road, is that budgeted and anticipating the cost changes, or is that?
Yeah, we wrapped in a 30% contingency on that. Neither Brian and I think that it's going to hit that, but we wanted to be prepared. The other piece on that is we've paid quite a bit of engineering up front that we won't finance. So the city's put in our share of that project in advance with engineering, and it's some substantial engineering costs to get that road ready. So.
Sorry, John. So these are the department slides. I'm just going to go over these very briefly. They were in your packet, so I want to just basically see if there's questions on any of the departments, and we have our departments heads here to answer any specific questions to their departments. So the first slide is city administration, excuse me. Any questions on priorities?
I would like to mention one thing is that the city hall facade is in here, but we took it out of the budget. Part of that was it's not needed for operations. We all want it. We love the design. but we need to wait and see. It's a tight budget, looking out 5 years. And so we just, at this point, we pulled it. And if we can add it back in next year, we will. But it's not required for operations.
Slide, please. Any question on the other 3 priorities here in city administration? And this is the capital improvements that Anne was just referring to. This is all of them, but of course the facade is in there as well. Any questions on this slide? This is the priorities of the city recorder. And Sammy, Sarah, if you have any questions specifically for her, any questions about their priorities? Slide, please. Thank you. Utility billing, the priorities there, and I'm just, if there's any questions, I will be happy to try to answer them. And if I can't, I'm sure somebody in here can. Any questions? No? City management is something that we have a great deal of interest in, obviously. We haven't had a major emergency, but we practice to make sure that if we do have one, we hopefully are prepared. Did you have anything you want to say on that, Ann, at all?
I think it's important to note that Jim Bell has been working as our emergency coordinator for several years, and he is going to be stepping down as of June 30th. And his duties are going to be absorbed by the Public Works Department. And so Brian will sign that as he sees fit, but we will continue our work. We just won't have an outside coordinator now.
There's no need to replace that outside coordinator.
I think that we have learned enough and we have kind of a system going at this point that I think it's going to be fine. I think that we have a great group that was formed of all emergency responders, including the fire department. We meet on the quarter with a meeting to talk about anything coming up emergency wise. And those are great meetings. I think that the relationships of the emergency responders have grown and how we work together is coming along. It's a lot of pieces. And we've also met with ODOT to talk about when there's a crash on the freeway and we have cars stacked up on our main drag and how can we help that situation. And so they're really important quarterly meetings and I think they're really helpful. And so I think that Brian will be able to manage assigning a staff member to help with that.
Question. Mayor.
It's muted. Mayor, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I just want to say that Jim Bell was a huge resource and he helped us put our emergency management planning together and carried it for a couple of years now. But like Ann said, we're having these quarterly meetings with ODOT and the county and others that help us bring together a lot of services and a lot of knowledge. So yeah, I think we're in good hands now, and I'm pretty sure our Public Works Department can take it forward. But we got really lucky when Jim Bell took this position for us.
Any other questions? Emergency management. Go to the next slide, please. Office administration, our number one priority is customer service. Not everybody's happy when they come in the front door, but we're hoping we can at least have them leave with a better understanding of what's maybe the problem or issue, and hopefully with a smile. That's our goal. Any questions about office administration? Next slide, please, Andy. Okay, we're getting into Public Works area. The first slide is our Parks Department, which is part of Public Works. You can see the priorities there. Are there any questions for Brian? Street Department, obviously we talked about the street repairs we're trying to do. There's other priorities up there, and if there's any questions specifically for Brian, he's here to help. Any questions?
Are we delaying any of the projects due to the current economic?
Yeah, so Brian said, the question was, are we delaying any of the projects at this time? And we are not at this time. Yeah, John.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about the street sweeper and the schedule for that? and cost?
Just to go back to that last question about delaying. Obviously, we're just putting out to bid the first major reconstruction project. So we're hoping that we get some good bids back. But, you know, Harrisburg just did their water treatment plant upgrades for the second bid cycle, and they're not going to be able to do that project because of cost overruns. So let's just keep our fingers crossed. Totally different project, but you know, the cost is going through the roof. Now, the street sweeper is in the budget, not this budget year, but next. So in our 5-year plan, that piece of equipment and the crack sealing machine are budgeted for next fiscal year, not this fiscal year.
Any other questions?
Well, we still will be doing crack sealing this summer, correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
But we're leasing it, renting it.
So yeah,
contracting it out.
yep, that's going to be put out to bid. And then hopefully moving forward, city staff, public works crews can do that work. Now, we are at capacity with our workload as we speak. So tentatively, that piece of equipment has been added to the budget. But moving into the next budget cycle, that might not be something that we want to invest in, and just go ahead and put it out to bid again for another part of town to do crack sealing.
Budget, we have budgeted $50,000 every year for
That's correct.
crack sealing and preservation, pavement preservation. There have been an analysis of the difference in cost of extra personnel or FTE for the city and the purchase of a machine versus continuing to contract the work out?
Not for that particular piece of equipment. Public Works as a whole, because Public Works isn't segregated into crew members in streets and parks, and they all do the work of the city as a group. So when we start to look at, you know, what the cost analysis for that type of treatment, it might be best for us to kind of wait to see what this next bid cycle, or when we put this part of town, when I say that, that's Austin Abbey, Water, and East McKenzie. Those will be the streets that we try and get done. So we have this little pot of money to work with, and we'll see how far that gets us. Now, if that gets us the whole thing, then yeah, we might want to go ahead and just keep putting that out to bid. But if it gets us this much, it might be beneficial for us to buy the piece of equipment ourselves. And that way we can do it probably a little bit cheaper than a contractor could. Does that make sense? Okay.
Any other questions? Slide, please. Thank you. The next slide is our water department. As you know, we're doing a large water project. It's keeping us plenty busy along with other chores we have. If you have any specific questions for Brian, please ask him. No questions. Next slide, please. This is the sewer department. Did you see our priors up there? Are there any questions for Brian? Hi, John.
Overall, we have $100,000 in the budget this year for the first phase of the planning for the facility for water and sewer. Is that correct?
But for sewer, are you talking about the operations building?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
So we have 100,000 in it for this year's budget, 100,000 for next year's budget. Can you just comment a little bit about the progress on that and how much we plan to get done this year with that?
Sure. Great question. So far where we're at right now is it's in engineering and final design. So I think we're at 60% ready. So once we get to the 100%, then we can start looking at when we put it out to bid. So we can start construction, would you say late spring of next year?
Yeah.
Which would carry into the next fiscal year, which would finish out that project. So that was kind of the idea of how we would manage that project.
It's split evenly over 2 years for the build. So it's starting in the early spring and finishing in the fall, possibly or summer, but it spans 2 fiscal years.
The summer of 23.
And the square footage, you have off your head? Square footage of the building?
Oh, that's a great question. I should have had the answer to this. Let me put it to you this way. It's just under the threshold for having to be sprinklered. So I want to say it's just shy of 5,000 square feet. So it's like 4,850 or something like that.
So you're really confident that's enough size for our immediate growth?
Yes, sir. Yes, I'm pretty confident. Yes. Because we do have the facility that we're in now in the office at the treatment plant. We do have a small shop just outside where the new facility will be built. And we're trying to get in conjunction with the fire department, a 2-bay building built off to the side that the fire department would help pay for. And with them paying for it in 10 years, the city would own it. So when they build their new fire department, their new build, then city public works would take over that 2-bay shop. So we're trying to get that in there as well. So we'll see if that goes.
To mention too is that if you notice that the cost of that building is spread over 3 departments, the street, water and sewer. So I was able to talk with professionals about this and talk with our auditor. And in the end, the sewer department will own that building, but other departments can help pay for it. And so that's why it's spread over the other departments.
We are very thankful because I know that this has been an ask for the last 3 budget cycles. And I just want to say that everybody in Public Works is very thankful that we're able to move this forward. Yes, sir.
You get off so easy in the beginning. 2 questions. One, did you come up with the concept for the design of the building and it happened to be just under the square footage that's needed, or did you, when it went down to save?
So yes and no. So obviously construction costs for a non-sprinkler building is much lower. But we took the square footage of the current building at the sewer plant and kind of laid out how that would look. I also took kind of the floor plan of a fire station that was built over in Eastern Oregon and how many vehicles they can fit in there, their training room, their offices, their room, shower facilities, and it all fit into this floor plan.
My other question, I'm just trying to understand this depreciation comment that Councilor Lehman brought up, because that was a big jump and I heard it was related to the sewer. And if we're depreciating the sewer at such large, are we having a big, will we need to invest in the sewer system big time, given the depreciation?
I think those are two separate.
No, so it's really unrelated.
Okay.
So we plan out in the future that we would have to have an investment in the sewer. We have the SDC set aside for that. I think there's almost $1 million in SDCs that allow us to drop in another membrane or, enhance the plant so that we can serve more customers. That is separate from depreciation. Depreciation is really it's an accounting term for, your equipment's worth less than it was when you put it in. And so we have to account for that. And so it's kind of unrelated as far as that.
But I can kind of ease your mind about aging equipment. We spend a majority of our time doing preventative maintenance. So that preventative maintenance is buying us time in that depreciation. So even though it depreciates at such a high rate, that equipment's going to last longer the more preventative maintenance that we put into it.
Brian.
Yes, sir.
So referring to the filter, the cartridge filter, I know 6 years ago, we estimated $300,000 to replace that, and it was supposed to be 10 years. I had heard reports that we could go as long as 15 years because the cartridge was working so well. What is the status of that? And have we looked at the price of a replacement cartridge from 6 years ago when we decided 300,000 would be set aside?
That's a great question. Now, before the economy kind of took a turn in construction and supply chain issues and things like that, the price of the membrane didn't change all that much. I think there might have been a 10% increase from when we originally put it in, which wasn't a big jump. It kind of surprised me. But going back to that conversation that we've had in the past about how we manage the treatment facility, the loads that we put on those fibers, right now it's not showing any signs of catastrophic failure or failure of any kind, to be quite honest. We do anticipate pulling them out probably this summer. We don't really like to do it in the heat of the summer because those fibers do not like to see extreme heat or wind, because it's, suspended in air and it's, $250,000 hanging there. So we don't really like to do that, but we do anticipate having to do some slack adjustment to tighten up the fibers. But as of right now, they're working as good as the day that they were put in.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions?
Oh, I do have the other part of the question. What will that cost to replace that now? Do you know?
I don't. I don't even want to try and ballpark it because it's probably went up maybe 30-40%,
Right.
but it possibly could come back down.
Yeah, it's really hard to judge any of this right now.
Well, I do appreciate the fact that you guys are on the maintenance of it. And I think that's part of why we haven't had to raise our rates and everything's still working good. So keep going.
Questions? If not, I'll move forward. Mandy? What's in front of you is our municipal court. Sorry, couldn't get that word out. Slide list of priorities, and Mandy's would be happy to answer any questions you might have for her. Slide, please. Finance Department. See our priorities, they haven't changed very much. Any questions for me on the Finance Department?
I guess I will ask one there.
Sure.
I read in the minutes from last year's budget meeting, we had a conversation or a question about new software. and It was like a year to implement or to
Yes.
purchase. Might for the people who are new in the committee, kind of refresh and update what's going on in that department, that area.
Right, sure. So we do want to get new financial software. There's better software out there. We know this for a fact. There's 2 companies in particular that are very strong for smaller cities. We have to put an RFP out and we have to select a vendor off that RFP, what the results are back from them. Once we select, I've heard that both of the vendors are 12 to 15 months out before it'll be implemented completely. That doesn't mean we won't be working on it in that 12 to 15 months, but it won't be online for at least a year, is what I'm being told at this point, because they're very busy.
Adding more capacity or just more efficiency.
The software
both.
itself.
Yeah.
It's way more efficient. And I can just say that because I've used one of the 2 softwares in a former job. It'll free up a lot of staff time, but it also takes a lot of staff time to convert. So it's biting that bullet. It's gonna be a lot of work, but it's gonna be worth it. It's one of those things, it's a lot of work, but it will be worth it.
And that cost is going to be about what?
We won't know that for sure till we get the RFP. The last time I checked, and these are ballpark figures, and it depends on if you do cloud or if you actually have a server on site. There's advantages to both, of course. If you have a server on site, it's more money. If you do cloud, it's less money, but your support costs are higher with cloud and less with the server. If you don't do a server, I seem to remember about $35,000. If you do have your own server, it's $85,000. So a considerable difference. Now this was a year ago probably, so I don't have a clue what they might be now, but that was what I was shared with about a year ago.
Other questions?
This is our planning department. I guess any questions you might have me for Ann?
Yep.
Any questions on planning? No questions, I'll move forward to economic development. Again, if you have any questions on economic development, that would be for Ann. We have Chief Larson here, so if you have any questions on the police department, he's here to answer your questions. I also included a couple of statistic slides that Chief Larson shared with the council at the last meeting. So they're behind that slide. Just thought you guys might like to see this. Some people thought it'd be a good idea, so we thought we'd share it with you.
This is something that was discussed at Budget Committee last year and Chief Larson implemented it. And so we're starting a trending of the activity of both crime and where our officers are spending their time. And Larry, you might want to share a little bit about that if you want.
I think you want to have a question. Are our total number of reserve officers down from a year ago?
Yes, we've lost a couple that got picked up by Oregon State Police.
I just remember the picture last year, seemed to be a few more bodies in it than what we have now, so.
Yeah, that's part of a volunteer program as they get picked up, with other agencies. So that's always a challenge.
And so how do we recruit and refill that?
We do an advertising and try to hire some more reserves, which I talked to Sammy last week about doing that, just to try to bump that back up. Because we depend on them a lot, especially for the community events.
I just want to say how pleased I am to see the statistics, because as you know, I was wanting
You
to
were, yeah.
have that information, and I think that will really help us support the police and look at how the time is spent and what we want as a city. So
Okay.
thank you for
You're
that.
welcome.
This is just Coburg, doesn't include the Harrisburg.
It does include Harrisburg because all the stats are all in the same data that we get from the county.
Oh, okay. For the second part of that question, I probably asked this when we approved the contract, but we have wear and tear in the cars on that for the Harrisburg budget.
I think all the costs were included when we gave Harrisburg a number. It included all of the administrative costs, including vehicle costs.
Basically, what we do is we take the cost of running this, all of the materials and services of the department, and break it down by the hours available. So there's a chart, there's a cost to run the police department per hour. And so what, however many hours they buy from us, they have to pay their share of that administration of the department. So, and then there's another calculation that it includes the personnel costs. So we have an average cost of personnel that's added to that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Please, Mandy. Please slide for you guys.
I just wanted to mention on the time record, and this is something that Larry and I have put together. And the reason why it's so important to track our police time is because if you see the 55% figure of police activity and patrol, and Harrisburg Patrol is in there as well, but we never want to see that 75% or higher, because if we are seeing a higher percentage of police officers being out on patrol, then we're seeing officers with not enough time to do the administration, not enough time to write the reports, not enough time to have leave, to be sick, to take vacations. And so we want to watch that really closely, because that can be an indication of when it might be time to look at we're overworking our officers. So that's why this graph becomes really important, and then hopefully that this time next year we can look at it again.
So to follow up on your appreciation of statistics, at some point in time, I think one statistic I would like to see is, and I don't know how you quantify it, how you calculate it, but the total police officer time, you know, how has that changed from last year to this year? I know with the reserve officer going down, I would assume that our total commitment of time to Coburg and Harrisburg has also gone down. This chart kind of shows the distribution of activity. But I think the other thing would be the distribution of total hours on the clock that our officers and our reserve officers are logging, and how that changes over time.
Any other questions?
I just want to first ask if you guys have had your books for a little while now, like over a week. If there is any questions about our proposed budget that anybody might have specifically? I'm going to talk a little bit about ending fund balance and just kind of what it looks like going forward. Any specific questions on our budget?
Anything concern you?
Yeah, a lot of things concern me. It's been a crazy year. I mean, so we keep saying this, it's been a crazy couple of years, but I think we're starting to see some of the results of what we've been dealing with for the last couple of years. And it just feels unpredictable to me.
I guess, you know, there's challenges, but is there anything that's really of concern?
Cost of living is scaring me a little bit because that affects everything in our budget. Eventually it filters down. to every part of our budget. So I'm hoping that gets under control a little bit in the next fiscal year.
But you feel we have the reserves and the revenue to address those?
For this particular year, we do. Looking at this slide right here, I do want to point out, it's a little troubling to see the general fund unappropriated fund balance in 5 years could be $36,000 now. Having said that, there's a lot that could happen in those 5 years. It's a projection, of course. You have anything you want to say on that, Ann?
Well, I think that I think as I shared in my budget message, this is a conservative budget. We are conservatively predicting growth, very conservatively. We don't know what's going to happen. And so it could be that 107 acres on the other side of the freeway sells immediately. And we have businesses in there that are paying great property taxes, and we're seeing utility users go up, and our franchise fees are increasing because they're using power. And it's a circular thing. When I talked to the state of Oregon this morning about that land being available, they're so happy because they think they have businesses to place there. But given the circumstances right now, we don't know what's going to happen. What we do know, even in the last 3 weeks, is development is happening in Coburg in spite of the economy. So we are seeing a new restaurant come in. We are seeing 2 businesses in our industrial district that we didn't plan on that are working on applications. And so we are seeing growth happening. That's positive. And so we are seeing a new residential neighborhood in. That's going to be new users. That's going to be new property tax dollars. So our budget is conservative. And I would say that for right now, as I look at this budget, I'm not overly concerned. Because if you look at our ending fund balances, they're pretty healthy till you get out to 26. Now, that is our cost of personnel compounding. I'm going to tell you that right now. That's what it is. The cost of employment, which is our largest asset of the city and our most expensive expense. So, but I would say that next year and into 25, if we're looking at this and it's still looking scary and it's not coming around, we might have to look at that. We might have to think about cutting the budget. But at this time, the reason we do the 5-year budget is we can look out there and there's this alarm down the road that says we need to be really aware that if we don't see growth, if all of a sudden the economy tanks and we're not seeing the things that we're planning on, that $36,000 out there in year 5, that becomes very important. And I think this is the value in doing the 5-year budget, and we have time to correct. And so for the next 3 years, we're fine. We're doing well. So we have some time.
I have a question, and it's about taxes. You mentioned taxes, big players pay big taxes. And I see that delinquent taxes have gone up pretty astronomically on the big sheet.
Now, that's something that every year we look at, and so taxes as a whole exceeded our expected this year. But there's always those people that don't pay their taxes and then all of a sudden they all get paid up. So it's one of those numbers that we put out there, but we never really know. It's a placeholder because we really don't know. We don't hear from the county unless we contact them. And so if I want to know something specific, I got to contact them. I was talking with them today about our URA because the taxes have went down on the URA of what we're collecting. And So they're doing it. I've asked for an analysis. I want to know why. I need a specific of why. And so unless we make that phone call, we just kind of go on and the county doesn't offer information to us. So we have to just kind of do our best to budget and then put placeholders as an expectation.
Any other questions?
This is not a content question, Tim, but rather just a minor point with regard to the capital project section in the binder. And by the way, I really appreciated the binder. It's extremely thorough and helpful, particularly for a new member. Just one minor point, the revenue sources that are listed for each capital project are abbreviated. It would be super helpful if there were a glossary, a key for those abbreviations. Some of them are obvious, but others were not obvious to me.
Certainly fix that.
Any other questions?
Next slide, please. Thanks, Mandy. Street fund. Any questions on the street fund? I think Ann has some information to share that we just learned today with the funding of the street fund. If there's no questions, I'll turn over to her and let her speak to that.
Yeah, so initially we we applied for $2.5 million in street funding through the OTIP, which is the ODOT bank. I didn't know if anybody knew that ODOT actually has a bank. And so we turned in our application and I was finally able to get the appointment today to go over their questions about the application. And during that conversation, what they really recommended, number one, if you're asking for anything more than $1 million, it's got to go through the commission, which is a long process to get adopted. If you ask for under $1 million, then the staff can approve your loan. And so that's going to change. They're making amendments to it, and it will be 5 million that the staff can approve. So the other part is the interest rate has went up to 3%. And so that's a rise and from when we started this process till now. And their recommendation was only take the money you need right now, only ask for the money you need. And so we are changing our application to $995,000 to cover our street projects for this summer. That's at a 3% interest. And their point was the interest rate could go down between now and next summer. And then, or we can put something in that says if the interest rate goes up, you still get to keep 3% even though you're asking for more money. So we can amend our application next year to ask for more money as we see how much we need. In the meantime, we'll be looking for grants. We'll be looking for other opportunities to fund our projects. So, so today I'll be bringing to the council an opportunity or a contract to borrow the $995,000, which should cover our Roberts Road and Mackenzie Street projects this summer.
Does the ODOT get the ability to approve up to 5 million?
She said that that's something that's coming to the commission this summer, that they would be making a change in their policies. Can answer any other questions that you have on the street funding. In the street budget, because the debt's going to be a little bit higher than we anticipated as well. So, so we'll bring it back next week, a adjusted budget to give them the new information.
Actually, just happened to notice that Oregon tax that's going into effect 2023. I see you guys got unemployment insurance. Some of these other ones broken out on here. I don't see that one on here yet. Is that something y'all tracking?
Not at this point, obviously. That's the first I've heard of it personally, but you can certainly check into it.
so small that a lot of times, the cities this small are exempt from a lot of those, that like family leave, FMLA, we're exempt from it.
Yeah.
We're just too small, so we're.
I don't believe y'all are exempt from this one.
Any questions on our water fund? Any specific questions? We're obviously in the middle of a project and things are picking up a little bit. It was slow for a while and things are moving forward. Next slide, please. Any questions on our sewer fund budget? There's no other questions. I'm not any, you certainly follow up with any questions on any part of the budget if you'd like to at this point. Questions?
Thursday is the bid opening for one of our first major water line replacement projects. So we will have a good idea about what construction costs in Coburg look like on Thursday. Just wanted to bring that up.
Also mention that I get a question a lot, and that is, so the reservoir is obviously going to move out a little bit. We're not going to get it done in the time frame. And so the question rises as, do we have enough water then, or do we have a concern? Are we going to have enough water for our residents? And I think Brian can assure you that we have 2 wells right now, and we are moving forward rapidly to develop the 3rd well. And that really has sprung forward as a much more important project to get done, so that we make sure that we have that redundancy in our water. And so I would say right now, the last I asked the engineer is that will be done in 6 months. So we will have the 3rd well in process. We do have 2 water reservoirs in working right now. And I don't know if Brian wants to add anything to that, but we get these questions, a lot of concerns of, well, if we're not going to have that reservoir, is there a concern for the amount of water we have? And the answer is not right now. Keep in mind that the water project is building for not just what we need today, but what we have anticipated for our future growth. And so for today, the engineer has shared with us on multiple occasions, we need to move forward and we need to get the well done, but we don't have concerns right now.
You comment a little bit more about Bigfoot and the first development on 107 acres, what we know now in terms of water consumption, income from franchise fees and.
We don't know anything because we don't have an application.
Okay.
They have not turned in an application.
Do we have any expectation of an application coming in like during the summer, or is it not that formed yet?
The last thing that I heard was Bigfoot had requested a different piece of the property. So they might be looking at something different. I don't know. But until we have an application in hand, or at least a pre-application meeting, which our engineer and Brian would meet with them and go over what they were thinking, we don't even have a starting point for anticipating what their usage would be.
Any other questions? Any questions from the members of the Zoom audience? Quiet group. If there are no further questions, I'm going to call the meeting to an adjournment. Okay, we're going to adjourn the meeting at 7:37. And meet again in
So, and our next meeting, I'm gonna be in California and I talked with Sammy a few weeks back that I would be on Zoom. So just want to reiterate that with her. I'll be expecting to get an invitation.
Perfect. She's so good at keeping track of that.